you someone who's heard the phrase, be the love that you wish to see in the world, but wondered to yourself, how can I do that with everything that's going on around me? Well, today we're going to look at that very question in depth. I felt called to speak to this topic today because it's something that we hear about so much in maybe personal growth or spiritual speak around being the frequency or the in the state that you wish to see in the world, to bring that into the world. Yet I suspect for many of us it can be very challenging to actually put that into action. What does that actually mean, and how am I supposed to do that? And the reason that this is so hard for so many of us is because of the heavy programming we've received from very early on in life that reinforces the idea that external circumstances must be a certain way in order for me to feel certain states, such as peace and joy and gratitude and love. We learn through cause and effect that we are a being that requires people around us or certain circumstances to line up in a certain way in order for those sorts of states to arrive. And our early experiences generally, do follow that formula, that when everything around me feels calm and peaceful, there's the feeling of peace inside of me. So it must be the external circumstances that I need to get right before I get to feel peace. Something happens, a positive experience, a celebration, a moment where everything goes positively in a good way for you, and you feel the state of joy. Same again. The external circumstances seem to be the source of that joy. And we just stay in that cycle, continuing to try to control external circumstances or hope that external circumstances line up so that we get to feel peace, joy, gratitude, and love. And this keeps us all scrambling on a hamster wheel for much of our lives, not really actually able to find the level of contentment that we really wish to experience, or only experiencing snippets of those states, and for much of the rest of our lives desperately hoping or longing for those states to arrive, and potentially pushing too hard to force circumstances in our lives to try and create the right circumstances to feel peace and joy and love. And yeah, it's a trap that's so easy to fall into, because certainly in Western culture, it's not strongly promoted that we have pathways to find those states internally for no particular reason, just because we have access to them without needing the external circumstances. And that we've actually got the formula completely backwards. That we can choose to find those sorts of emotional states, some might choose to call them frequencies, and repeatedly find our way back to those despite what's going on externally to us. Now, that can be very challenging. I'm not trying to make that sound super simple, and it's just like anything that really has a positive impact over time, requires repetition and practice to find your way into these sorts of emotional states. It's not a capacity that most of us can nail really quickly. They are states that we certainly found our way to much easier when we were children. We were naturally curious and joyful, and found calm and peace in very simple moments, until that programming really started to take over us, and we felt the need to earn worth or love or meet certain expectations, which is pretty unavoidable in the Western world, but not the way we are meant to be. And so one of the simpler ways to start this process, if you're interested in being able to access these states, is to start using memories of accessing those states in meditative moments to give yourself access to states such as peace, joy, gratitude, and love. And you'll probably find a lot of guided meditations out there aim to do that. There'll be stacks of them on YouTube and all sorts of other platforms that guide the individual to access that sort of emotional space. And using a memory can be a very helpful way to get started. So finding a memory where there was a profound sense of peace, and really landing in that, feeling into it again, remembering it, bringing it through the body, and then you've got your access point. You've then got a remembrance of what peace feels like. And over time, you don't necessarily need the memory to access it. You know what it feels like, and you can just deliberately choose to be in a state of peace, even just with a few breaths. Same goes for joy and gratitude. Using memories as a reference point to activate the feeling, and then with repetition over time, dropping away the need for the memory and being able to just choose those states for no reason whatsoever. Just because it serves you, just because it's actually what you are at your core, what you always were at your core before the lies got overlaid. That you can only have those states if the external world is in a certain state. Now, let me, I guess, be clear on this. Obviously, if you have just had some terrible event happen to you, a grief, a loss, I'm not advocating that you deliberately seek out the emotion of joy in the midst of that experience. Honoring all range of human emotions is very important, and to try and push away grief, sadness, etc., using this kind of concept of deliberately accessing emotional state can be, some would say, seen as bypassing some kind of an avoidance of the heavier emotion, the just different emotional state that a sadness or fear, etc., asks us to pay attention to. Not necessarily that it's bad. Obviously that those sensations or those experiences can, or those emotions can feel not so pleasant, but to label them as the bad ones or the negative ones, isn't necessarily always helpful, and maybe best just to label them as states that all humans have to go through, rather than necessarily the bad ones. So yes, I'm not suggesting that deliberately finding peace or joy when some external circumstance has activated something in you that needs to be worked through, moved through your system. That's certainly not what I'm suggesting here. But if we were to take an average day where nothing particularly negative has happened, or even if there's a background level of stress going on in your life, maybe your finances aren't quite the way you want them to be, or your job isn't quite the way you want it to be. So it's not an acute or in-your-face situation that you have to deal with immediately. A bit of a chronic, undesirable scenario. Rather than waiting for that thing to fix itself, when I get a new job or when I get more money or when that person is nice to me, then I'll allow myself to feel peace or to feel joy. You could be waiting for a very long time and just perpetuating the state that you're in. And so finding moments, the start of the day can be a particularly good time. Also the middle of the day, the end of the day, taking certain points of the day where you deliberately take a few moments. Maybe it's a meditation in the morning where you deliberately come into that stillness within your heart and just feel some peace or some joy for being alive. Just because. And it sets the tone for how you go through the rest of your day. Yes, there will then be the boss that treats you poorly, or the stress of children that aren't behaving the way you would like them to. But you've already set your baseline frequency for the day at a higher level that those circumstances perhaps don't have the same level of impact, or at the very least you're able to then pull yourself up a little bit out of those, say in the middle of the day, where you pause again and find that stillness, that peace, that joy, that gratitude for whatever you can find that for. As I said, it's not determined by the external circumstances. It's what can I find my way back to in this moment that puts me in alignment with something that's closer to what we would call love. And I would say peace, joy, gratitude coming together are all facets of what we might call a state of love or unconditional love. And this is not the kind of love that we're talking about in romantic relationships. It's the kind of love that we all have access to just for being alive. Just because there's this spark in us underneath all of the layers of emotions and beliefs, the wounds, etc., that was who we were as that little child, joyful to just experience life. That lovingness for just being is what we can find our way back to remembering, because most of us have forgotten. And so sometimes it could be using those very early memories of peace or of joy. I remember one of my earliest experiences that I didn't register at the time but look back on when I started to learn about mindfulness later in life was an experience where I was laying on the grass watching the ants just crawl through the blades of grass, and I recall, I'm not sure what age it was, maybe 7, just laying there for quite a period of time and being sort of mesmerized and just in this state of what I would now say peace watching those ants crawl through the grass. And that is a powerful reference point for me to use when I've trained myself to find, or if I've needed a particular memory to find my way back to peace. That could be one of the ones that I use. Gratitude. I have a memory of my son not long after he was born, sitting on my lap as about a 9 or 10 month old, and just feeling this immense appreciation for getting to be his father. That memory of gratitude is a powerful one that I've used to trigger that feeling in me at will. But these days, it's come to a point where I just stop and breathe into my heart, perhaps sense some kind of light, an orb of light, a spark of light inside of me, and just choose to feel love because I can, because I wish to reconnect with that as I live my life in this body as a human being. So over time, I have been able to let go of needing the memories as much. Potentially still need to go to them at times if my mind's a little bit busy and I'm having trouble accessing the feelings on command, but mostly, and that's just through repetition, through consistently going there in my meditations, that I can find my way there. But not just in meditations, in everyday moments throughout the day. Just pausing and choosing. I will be offering a guided meditation to help those of you that might be interested in developing that capacity to access states of peace, joy, gratitude, and love at will. So that will be a video that will follow this one. And but in the meantime, just perhaps start playing with it on your own. Find some memories. Find an access point. If you don't have any memories at all, if you're struggling to find memories, then create a scenario that you know could really, that you would associate with those sorts of states of peace, of joy. It could be some kind of future scenario that helps you to get to those states. So if you believe that being in a certain type of relationship would really make you feel very joyful or grateful, in a state of gratitude, and you're not in that relationship at the moment and you can't access anything from the past, then imagine that future scenario where you've got that kind of connection with a person to spark that state. But I think for a lot of us, we underestimate that we have touched on those states at least a small number of times in our lives. If you're someone that's had a very traumatic and tough life, and me stating that is very hard to comprehend and find any moments, then maybe the future focused, fantasy scenario could help you. But it doesn't have to be big, grand, standout moments. They can be very simple moments that help you connect with these states. And as I said earlier, It really is a remembrance. It's remembering that we are peace. We are joy. We are grateful for this existence. And we are love. Thank you. Be love.